Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Understanding and Dissecting Safety and Compliance in the Promotional Industry by Paul Bergman from High Caliber. Before we get started, I'll go over a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to Paul by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send your questions in at any time and we'll collect and address these during the Q&A session at the end. To give a brief introduction on today's presenter, Paul has over 15 years experience in the promotional products industry. His passion has always been safety and compliance along with product development, so Paul is now actively involved with both, using his knowledge to bring a new understanding to these important regulations. Paul has served on the board of directors for an organisation much like APA as the membership chair, where he was responsible for ensuring members had access to education, especially in regards to safety and compliance. He is excited to share what he knows and how it can be used, not only to be compliant, but also to generate sales and be a point of difference in the marketplace. I'll now hand you over to Paul.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everybody attending. I will apologize ahead of time because I typically do these kind of conversations face-to-face, and so I feel slightly disconnected, but I'm going to walk through it. Keep in mind that a lot of the information that I have in my head comes to me secondhand now, so I don't always think about questions and going into detail on certain things. So if there's anything that I go through that is confusing, or if I left out a piece of information that you want to know, definitely take advantage of asking that as a question at the end. So I'll go ahead and go through the deck now. So it's safety and compliance in promo. I want to be very specific. It's a quick introduction. Safety and compliance is ongoing. It changes every year. The standards get more rigorous. And as things happen in society, you know, if somebody were to choke on something or something similar, standards are born. So this is going to be a quick overview, and we'll start. So what are safe standards and why do they exist? A standard is a guide or a requirement directly related to the interaction of a product with its user. Standards exist to protect people, places, and property. Some are guidelines, while others are actually written into law. Obviously, different standards and guidelines exist for different groups. So just to give you a quick idea of those groups, you've got infants, 1 month to 36 months, children, so 3 years plus, the general public, this is typically adults, pets and animals, the environment, and personal property. So there are more categories than this, but in the world of promo specifically, this is probably the only 6 groups that you're going to be looking at. So what controls the stringency of the standards that apply to people? As we're working on promotional products, most of these products are ending up in the hands of, you know, either children or their parents, adults in the general public. So age groups is what is the biggest identifier and requirement for the stringency of standards. So they're broken into 3. The first one is for infants. Then this is also in order of importance. So the most stringent requirements are applied to infants. The second is children. And the third is the general public. Now, when talking about promo and safety and compliance in promo, and I'm doing this as an introduction and trying to keep it simple, there are 2 very important things to remember, especially if you're just getting started in this. I call it the promo compliance trinity. And that consists of toys. And so what you see listed there are the Australian and New Zealand standards. So that's the actual numbers and what they apply to. So the first one's for choking hazard. The second one is the migration of elements like lead or heavy metals. Your next category is food contact. Again, there's the Australian standard. And one that I felt very relevant to Australia in promotion is button batteries. So the standards are still being formalized. They don't have a standard number at this time. However, the standards are in place and they are being enforced. So real quick, for testing purposes, the facilities that test typically look at the countries with the strictest requirements. And so what I've done here is I've given you those testing requirements as they should be applied for the categories that I've listed. So for toys, you want to test for using EN 71. This is a European toy standard safety test. For food contact, you want to test using FDA 21. This is a US Food and Administration standard. And for button batteries, there'll be a link in the deck that gets sent out that will take you directly to where those standards are. I've also gone ahead and written that in, European Toy Safety Standards, US Food and Drug Admin Standard. Keep in mind as well that the Australian and New Zealand standards that I've listed on this page make direct reference to the tests that I'm recommending. So the toy standards definitely say that you can use the EN71 for testing, and the food contact standard in Australia literally says refer to FDA 21. So in both of these scenarios, these are the tests that you're going to conduct to be compliant. Real quick, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at for food contact and button batteries. For food contact, it can literally be anything that's going to come in contact with food. It depends on how rigorous you want to be. So I'm talking bags, bottles, lunch containers, coolers, cutlery, napkins. The best way to determine this is to talk to your client, and we'll get to that in the next pages. But button batteries. Now this one's a little bit different. This literally pertains to anything that contains an accessible button cell battery. It doesn't really matter how it's marketed, what happens to it. If you can get to the battery easily, then you're going to have to adhere to these requirements. With toys, it's pretty self-explanatory. The biggest definer on toys is the perception or the actual use of play value. So if it's something that's intended to be played with, or it looks like it can be played with, then that's going to fall into a toy category. So that was the first important thing, is the promo compliance trinity. The second most important thing that I would take away from this is Product Safety Australia. So there is a website. This website allows you to log in. You can go to it. You can search for product categories. You can review the standards that are in place. You can review the news about the standards, what's being talked about, what's being discussed. You can review recalls. It'll walk you through what a recall process looks like. You can review safety laws, current safety and compliance news, and then there's contact us information on this page as well. You can go there, you can contact, you can ask questions. It's a great resource for any standards that are going to be specifically applying to Australia. This is also a great resource and a place to direct your customers. So if you're really trying to sell the idea of product safety and compliance, one of the best ways to do that is to actually put your money where your mouth is. So, go to this site, find the standard, copy the link, send it to your customer and say, hey, this is why this is important. This is a requirement. This is a law in Australia. And these are the standards that have to be adhered to. And that's going to be an amazing resource, not only for you, but for educating your customers as well. So a quick guide to implementing. A lot of people think that safety and compliance is very overwhelming. I break it into a couple simple steps. So 3 simple steps. The first one is to identify. What is the intended use of the product? And these are questions you want to ask your customer. What is the perceived use of the product? How will the product be distributed? To whom will the product be distributed? How is the product packaged or marketed? How are similar products in the market packaged, and to whom are they marketed to? And does the product hold play value? I'll go through some case histories on the next few pages, and these steps will make a little bit more sense as well. The second step is to determine. So once you've identified who the product's going to, what the intended use is, and what the age group it's going to be directed to, you want to determine what relevant standards need to be addressed. So this is where it's important to have that Product Safety Australia website where you can go and type in, plastic water bottle. Look up the standards for water bottle and go, okay, now that I've identified that, how it's going to be used and where it's going out to, what are the standards going to be required for this particular product? And then a very important thing to keep in mind too, it is possible that some products could require multiple standards to be considered. And one of the case histories that we'll go into, I'll give you guys an example of that as well. 3, execute. Now this is a fairly easy step. You want to make sure that your factory and or your local supplier is aware of the standards you're expected to meet. So if you're discussing with your customer, I'll use a random example, a water bottle, and okay, this doesn't have any play value, but it is going to come in contact with food or beverage, so I'm going to test it under FDA 21. You want to make sure that you're passing that information on to your factory or your local supplier. So this isn't something you want to do on your own or behind the scenes. You want to be very upfront, whether you're working with a supplier like myself, High Caliber, or you're working with a factory offshore. You want to let them know this needs to pass FDA 21. So one of the best things that you can do in being proactive about this is request any similar testing done for other projects in the past. This isn't going to give your project compliance, but it will give you a small peace of mind and allow you to know that the raw materials being used in your project are most likely going to pass. So I'll tell a factory, you know, what other water bottle have you made using the same raw materials before that you've tested? Okay, send me the test results for that. Most factories are happy to share the results. I know as a supplier, I'm also happy to share the results. I typically will block out the information as to who the end user and distributor were, but happy to share passing test results for any kind of product we've done in the past. This will give you and your customer a peace of mind if you decide to tell your customer about getting the raw material testing like this, that when you get to the testing point for their product or their project that you're going to have a pass. After that, you want to arrange samples, not only to be sent to yourself so that your customer can approve them as like a pre-production sample, but you also want to arrange at the same time for that sample to go to the testing facility. So this is the best point I have found in my experience to send the sample to the testing facility. Once the factory's executed it and you have your sample to approve with your customer, you want to get it over to testing because testing can take anywhere from a week to 3 weeks. So you don't want to get lost in time waiting for these test results to come back. And you definitely don't want to test after mass production because in the off chance that something comes back as a fail, you've already produced all your goods. Okay, so like I said, there's some case histories, so we can take a look at it in action. These are real case histories. So the first one is the Chico handy holder. This is something executed by High Caliber. It was a fun project. And the second one is a point of sale display that was done as a plush. I also want to give everybody a quick note. Both of these projects were high profile, so they were very large quantity, large dollar. And in these situations, we're actually willing to assist in person. So for both of these projects, the distributors contacted us and said, we need somebody who can come in and talk about safety and compliance. So I elected myself. I went in under the hat of the distributor. So, you know, if I was working for Joe's Promos, I would walk in and say, hey, I'm the production manager or the safety and compliance guy for Joe's Promos. It's something that we're very happy to do. So if you're working on a very high profile project and you don't feel confident talking about some of these, you know, requirements and answering questions on the spot, you do have the opportunity to have us come in. On the flip side of that, if you're working on something that's not necessarily a high profile project, but you still need assistance, I'm happy to get on the phone with you and walk you through it or give you a step-by-step guide via email of questions to ask and steps to implement with your customers. So we'll look at the first one. So like I said, there was 3 steps. So we're going to look at identify and determine on this first one. So identify. So these are literally the questions that I asked of in this situation was the end user because I was sitting there with the distributor when this happened. So what is the intended use of the product? This was to hold Chico rolls while driving. So the idea was it was going to go into a cup holder and it was designed to hold a Chico roll. What is the perceived use of this product? It's a Chico roll car holder. Now, a lot of people, if you take the Chico roll out of it, can have a bunch of different perceived uses of this, but definitely not falling into the toy world, which is really the only red flag you want to look for. How will the product be distributed? So this is a social media contest winner distribution. They did radio, they did TV, a ton of social media, and to whom will the product be distributed? It was, you know, quote unquote contest winners. Users had to do something on social media and send something in to qualify, and then in response, they were sent back one of these products. How is the product packaged or marketed? The end user was very specific on having an as seen on TV kind of infomercial feel to it, which is great because that's a very adult market. It doesn't really lend itself for, again, the red flag that we're looking for, which is toys. How are similar products in the market packaged and to whom are they marketed to? This can be a little bit tricky on an item like this because it is a custom product in the shape of a hand that holds, you know, a very specific product that's relevant only to this brand. However, you have to really kind of break it down. So in this, I looked at it and said, okay, so the primary market is adults, specifically targeting those who drive because this is going into a cup holder. And similar products are marketed as automobile accessories. So if you're thinking, you know, something that's a car holder, that's the only really way to categorize it for looking for similar items in the marketplace. The great thing about this is that if you're targeting people who drive, you're kind of in a non-children market and demographic, which is great. So does the product hold play value? Again, keeping our minds clean and staying on the children's perspective, the answer is no. I'm sure some creative uses could be thought of otherwise, though. Now, determine. So food contact, the answers become yes. This is the actual intended use. It's meant to hold a Chico roll, so it's definitely going to come in contact with food. Is it a toy? No. Now, I didn't put electronics in earlier, but I've thrown it in here. Is it electronic? No. And does it contain button batteries? No. So looking at this, the only test that's really standing out from our Trinity that I mentioned before is going to be food contact, which, as I stated before, is FDA 21 testing. So I want to make an important note at this point, though. The decoration of a product can change the intended demographic, and it could create additional requirements to consider. So I've thrown Dora the Explorer onto this, and here's a really important fact to note. When this happens, this actually could now be perceived as play value. You put a character onto this item that has direct connection to a very low age group. Because of this, you actually are now going to push yourself into the toy world. So there's a couple ways this can happen, either from decorating the product, decorating the packaging, or the actual product itself. So you want to keep those in mind in the toy world, and these are the red flags that we look for. So when you sit down and you talk to your customer about it, the identifiers and nothing red flags there, the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you understand how the packaging is going to be decorated and how the product's going to be decorated. In this case, had Chico decided to put Dora the Explorer on this, we would have gone over to determine and we would have put toys, yes. So keep in mind with product safety and compliance, the typical rule of thumb is better safe than sorry. So always err on the side of safety and being more cautious than thinking, oh, okay, I'll get through this. Okay, so executed. So I can't share the actual test results for this one because I haven't blacked them out, but I wanted to give you guys a quick heads up on what they look like. So you've got on the left-hand side there the first page of an SGS test result, and on the right-hand side, the last page. The pages that are in the middle are all of the tests that are done and whether they and what the levels of each test were. The front page is very important. It is going to include the name of the product, your name as a distributor, the name of your end user, and this is all required for legal purposes. You want everybody's name who's attached to the project to be on there. It's also going to include a little guide of pass and fail. This is basically a little summary, overview, and you can get all the information you need off of page 1, which is great. The last page, and this is an automatic for a facility like SGS, has photos. This is very, very important, and one of the main reasons why taking just a similar test result doesn't work. So if you were ever to be challenged legally, looking at a similar test result and going like, okay, so I've done the Chico hand holder, I haven't tested it, but we used the same plastic to, make a penguin, and here's the testing for that. In the eyes of the law, that no longer qualifies because you've now sent a product into a testing facility that is not actually what you're distributing. So in this case, the image at the very end, it needs to be the product that you're going to distribute, which again is why I say when you ask for your pre-production samples, get them over to the testing facility. You want the test results to be in your name, that you want them to be specific to the project that you're doing, and you want to make sure that you've got those confirming images on the last page so there's no questions. So executing this. So requested similar testing from factory utilizing the same raw materials to ensure the product would pass. This is not something I pass along to customers typically. It's a pre-screen that I do. And this is just to make sure that the raw materials that I've asked to be executed for the project are ones that have passed similar tests previous. 1 PPS went to the customer, pre-production sample, for approval, and 1 went to SGS for testing. As I said before, that's this typical when I send out the item for testing is when it goes out for approval as well. So I've instructed SGS to test for FDA 21, which is the food contact testing that we spoke about earlier. Arrange the SGS reports to reflect the distributor and end user information. SGS in most testing facilities will put down any information that you want. So if you wanted to say, hi, I'm Joe's Promos, and I'm testing on the behalf of NAB Bank, they will put that on the test results. And that is information you definitely want included. Received back passing results. We had already kind of known that because we had looked at the raw materials, but it's still a requirement to get these passes back, and every now and then you'll see a surprise. I've done this for very many years now, and factories may change something when they go into production, and that's why things like this are very important. Results were turned over to the distributor, and then the product packaging was labeled to reflect FDA 21 approval. It is not required on every single item and category out there, but it's something that I recommend, and I use it as a selling point. So if you've gone through the process of getting something tested, and you've paid for it and you're using this as a sales tool with your customer, make sure there's a reward and a benefit to them. And additionally, labeling the product or the package that it's been tested and it's passed also reduces the headache later down the road of someone in the general public getting a hold of it, wanting to know if it's safe, and then trying to find the way back to the manufacturer. Because, for example, if it's NAB Bank, they're going to call NAB Bank. They're going to maybe get in touch with the marketing person. That marketing person's going to have to chase you down. You're going to have to chase the factory down. It is a very long process. If you had just put simply on the product, you know, this is BPA free, this is FDA 21 approved, you can remove a lot of headaches. So there's a couple benefits to labeling. It's something that I recommend. In some cases, it's required. You'll see that with this one. So this is the other case history. So this is a display dog. So what is the intended use of the product? It was a point of display in stores, okay? What is the perceived use of the product? It's a giant stuffed animal. So pretty simple. How will the product be distributed? Display purpose only for in-store promotion. They had no plan to give this out to the general public. To whom will the product be distributed? Retail stores, managers, and owners. How is the product packaged or marketed? Packaging was not applicable in this. Marketing was not applicable on this. It wasn't something that was going out to the general public. It was literally being used as a display. But now we're going to get into the red flags I was talking about before. How are similar products in the market packaged, and to whom are they marketed to? Plush is marketed as a toy, and it's marketed to all age groups. Now, does the product hold play value? Yes. So this is where you've hit a red flag. So this item right here that we're producing is meant to be a display. It's not even really meant to end up in the hands of the general public. However, because we're now looking at something that potentially holds play value, now you've classified it as a toy. So when we go to determine, is it going to come in contact with food? Is it a toy? The answer is yes. It's perceived as a toy. If a kid were to encounter it in the store, it's very possible they would want to play with it. And so because of this, now you've had a red flag come up, and now we're going to have to test this against toy standards. Electronics, no. Button batteries, no. Okay, so executing this. So real quick, we carry two plush animals. We carry a koala and a kangaroo. These are the testing results that we have, and we are happy to share them with anybody. As you see to the left, the front page, I block out our information. So these test results were created to protect High Caliber. So they've got my factory information on it, and they've got my information on it. So I've taken out the factory information, and I've blocked out High Caliber information so that these test results can be shared with anybody all the way down to an end user level. So again, because I couldn't show the plush dog SGS report, I'm showing this one instead. So how this was executed. So requested similar testing from the factory utilizing the same raw materials, same as the previous one. One PPS went to the customer, one went to SGS. In this case, we instructed SGS for the toy testing, which is the European standard I mentioned before, EN 71. Arranged the SGS reports to reflect the end user and the distributor information. Got back the pass results, turned it over to the distributor. Product packaging labeled to reflect that it was passing. And one little tiny caveat that it's not here in Australia yet, but it's coming. So, and that's the added tracking and a batch code. So to the left here, you're going to see, or bottom left, you're going to see the sew-in label that was attached to these dogs. Now, some of the things that are required are going to be, an age grading or a warning. So in this case, because we can't apply this to, infants age 1 to 36 months, you actually are required to put an age grade and let people know, okay, this is a toy. We recognize that it has play value, but we're age grading it, and there's a reason why. So in this case, the label says for ages 3+, warning recommended for children over 36 months due to some fiber loss. Now, this has to do directly with the fact that if you have an infant pulling and ripping at this plush, the fibers are going to come off. Are they dangerous? Not necessarily. But again, I always say that we err on the side of safety. This is very common for PLUSH, and the age grading is something that is a protector as it is a warning to parents. So in this case, I've gone a step further, and the US standards for toy safety, and specifically for PLUSH as well, is that you have to batch code it. So batch coding basically means that you have to provide a code that tracks the origin of that particular batch of goods that were produced back to its source. So kind of a big thing to take on in your head, but try to stick with me on this. If you look at the top part of the label, it'll say all new materials, polyester fiber, surface washable. So it's got to say where it's made. So it's made in Indonesia, what it conforms to. So I've listed the Australian New Zealand standard. And then you've got your tracking code. So you've got HC, which is high caliber, Indo, which is the factory. You've got my PO number to my factory. Then you've got the distributor's PO information. And then you've got the batch code, which happened to be our invoice number. What this allows is that anybody with this information could be brought back to the address on the back of the tag where it says Merck and PI and tracked all the way back to the safety test results. So that's something that's required in the US. They don't do the batch tracking here in Australia yet, but erring on the side of safety and thinking in the future that you want to be compliant, I always do it. So this is automatic. If you order PLUSH from High Caliber, for example, we don't give you the opportunity to do anything that's not tested. Every single one of our PLUSH products is tested, and every single one of our PLUSH projects has the batch coding and the tracking built into it. Okay, so getting out of that, using the information to sell. So one really important thing that I like to tell distributors, and I used myself as a distributor, is don't discount the products you sell. Make them worth more. So if you're in a competing battle for price, the worst thing you can do is literally go back and forth with another distributor on, price cutting. Okay, you're going to take 5 cents off. I'm going to take another 5 cents off. So I've always encouraged people to find points of difference that make it hard for your competitors to keep up with you. Safety and testing is a great example of that. So instead of competing on price, advise your clients that testing and documentation are included. If you want to compete on a level and you want to reduce your margin, great, go ahead and do it. But instead of actually giving your customer a discounted price, come in with something a little bit more clever. Tell them that the safety and testing is going to be included. We're going to make sure that your product is compliant. We're going to have it tested, and we're going to pass this testing over to you. It's worth a lot. Educate your customers on the importance and legal requirements for testing. So send them to the product safety website that I mentioned to you before. Some people can perceive this as a scare tactic, and if that's the simplest way to understand it, then great. The reality of it is that we live in a world where we are putting merchandise into the hands of the general public, and there is a responsibility there on all parties to make sure that we are being as proactive as we can to make sure these products are safe and not going to hurt anybody. So one of the best tools you can use with your customers is education. Let them know what the standards are and what you're prepared to do to help them and to make sure that they are protected. Remind your customers of the consequences for launching unsafe products into the general public or marketplace. There are tons of news articles on recalls. If you're selling fidget spinners, for example, there have been fidget spinners recalled all over Australia. You can go and grab one of these news articles and you can share it with your client. Let them know, if you launch a product where you've neglected to do safety and testing, and you get somebody that decides to take it into a government facility and say, hey, I think this is unsafe, and they test it and it's not compliant, you can't claim ignorance or negligence. In the eyes of the law, it's your responsibility. You've distributed it. So I use this logo on one of our EDMs, but this is a very important point and, a good visual for your customer. You want to keep your client's logo where it belongs. So obviously on the product, not in the daily news. The unfortunate part about a recall, and I implore all of you to go to the product safety website and click on the recall process, is it's incredibly daunting. So in the situation of a recall, you can be required to do things like commercials and newspaper advertisements and such public exposure to recall an item, and it can destroy a brand. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you were McDonald's and you had a toy that went out that wasn't safe and you had to issue a recall, that could destroy and just the PR nightmare that it would create is just a nightmare for people. You know, like you don't want to have your brand associated with, you know, a toy that caused a kid to choke, or a toy that, you know, had lead in it and it poisoned a kid. This is something that could damage a brand, you know, irreparably for years. So these are important things, and this is how I sell it. So when I was a distributor, and even as a supplier now when I sell it to distributors, this is a priceless thing. These standards are requirements that exist. Some of them are written into law, and so whether or not you know about them doesn't mean that they're not there. And more importantly, you know, like I said before, there is a responsibility to make sure that the products we're putting out are safe. Real quick, safety documentation. That little guy popped up. I'll just click through here. So testing results and how to present and prepare them. So you want to make sure to advise the testing company to include your name and your client's name. Everybody will get a copy of this deck, so you can use these as checklists. Require images included in the paperwork. This is automatic with SGS. I have seen it not be automatic with some testing facilities. They don't typically charge for it, so make sure you ask. Require pass or fail to be included. Not all the testing facilities will do this unless you ask, but there's no charge to do it, and it's better than looking at, you know, 10 pages of test results trying to figure out, you know, what the detected limits of every kind of, you know, element that you're testing for was. They can give you a summary page that'll literally just say pass or fail, and I promise you this is exactly what you and your customers want to look at. You want to be able to look at, okay, so it's tested for 10 different things, pass, 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 pass. So very important to ask. Send completed copies to your customer and advise them to file them. So these are important documents that you need to keep on file, and different areas have different requirements. I know that, for example, in the States, that you're required to keep this kind of stuff on file for 7 years. I also always recommend people keep records for yourself, and I would let your customer know that as well. Like, look, I'm giving you a copy of these test results, but we're also going to keep them on file just in case you ever misplace them. It's all about adding a point of difference and value into providing this kind of information, and so you want to kind of seal the deal at the end and let them know, not only are we protecting you, but we're also going to hold on to this, and if you ever need it as a reference in the future, we're going to be there to help you. We took it a step further. If you're working on a really high-profile project, this is a cool idea. It also takes a little bit of the burden of you having to remember where you filed the paperwork. But we created a website. So this website actually has these testing results loaded up on it that parents can go and click on and take a look at. That way, I don't have to constantly, you know, be running to the file cabinet, you know, or emailing these out. I can send people a link, and they can actually go to the website and view the safety and testing results. Depends on how much you want to spend, you know. To build a landing page that's simple like this, and for a domain, you probably be in for maybe $100. So if it's a big enough project, or you're trying to win something, this is another point of difference that's interesting. A lot of times, if you have your own website, you can add a page onto it pretty simply. And post these documents and then just send your customers the link to it. Again, just making the information easy to access is going to be a big selling point. So locating testing facilities, there are a lot of labs and testing facilities, especially in China. So what I've done is I've located 2 local ones for you. So you've got SGS, which is who I use. This is the Australia head office information. Then we also have Intertech. So these are 2 very reputable. They are recognized worldwide. There are more. There is ULSTR, which is another really strong one. But besides those 3, SGS, Intertech, or ULSTR, I wouldn't go venturing into some of the little quote-unquote knockoff testing labs out there. Mainly because you want a lab that's going to have that worldwide recognition. SGS I find to be incredibly efficient, incredibly affordable, and very knowledgeable. So if you are curious about something, if you know, I'll use the water bottle example again, and you call up and go, hey, I have a water bottle, and I know it's going to come in contact with, you know, liquid, and I need to get it tested. They'll actually hold your hand a little bit and go, okay, well, the standard that you need to adhere to is this. We test for FDA 21 because of this. And to be honest, in the 15 years that I've been in promo, most of the information that I have learned and most of the safety and compliance I know has come from working with SGS. So I have gone to I've participated in webinars, I've gone to conferences, I've gone to seminars, and I've plugged myself in full of a ton of information, but to be 100% honest, the most useful information came from actually working with these facilities. And companies like SGS are always available by email and by phone, and they don't charge to answer questions. They want your business. They want a test product for you, so they're going to help you, in facilitating that. And there's a lot of information that can be gained from it. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them now, keeping in mind that safety and compliance is a very living thing. It happens to be relevant in the moment. So I've also included my contact information there. So if you ever run into a situation or you're curious, you can always contact me. As I stated before, we do in-person assistance as well if the profiled project is high enough. So I'm talking about a project that might be $5,000 plus. Then you can give us a call and we'll arrange to have someone come out and meet with you, or meet with you and your end user if you want. Otherwise, for any other requests, you can always email me or you can call me on my mobile. I'm always really happy to talk about this. And I have more detailed decks and checklists that I'm not presenting right now because I'm trying to do something quick and kind of an intro, but I can provide to you to walk you through these processes as well. But I will give this back over to Kate.
Thanks, Paul. That was great. Such an important and relevant topic. Do you have a couple of questions that have come through? The first one is, would you do a custom plush project and not bother with testing?
For me, no. So I've given people advice before. I can think of a request that just literally came through a month ago where the distributor didn't want to pay for the testing. So as a policy, High Caliber will actually walk away from those projects. It does add a lot in. So just as a rough example, a water bottle with FDA 21 testing might only cost you $400. Plush typically is a bit more expensive. The reason why are that there are a lot more standards to adhere to, like flammability and the type of material and choking hazards and things like that. And every test costs something. So plush can range. It can be a couple $1,000s. And if you're doing 2,000 or 3,000 units, it could be $1 extra you're paying. But to me, because of the regulations that exist and because of things like toys are actually written into law. That's not like we suggest you follow this. This is you have to follow this as far as Australia's standards. So can it be done? Yes. Can it be done through High Caliber? No. Would I recommend any distributor going forward and producing a custom plush job without safety and compliance testing? Absolutely not.
Sounds good. Okay, and the second question is, we are about to do an indent order for 2,000 umbrellas to a media company. I have entered the umbrellas into the website to check the compliance. Is this all we need to do? Is this what we need to do, or do we just ask our current manufacturer?
That's a really good question. So the product safety site isn't always going to pull up everything. So it's a matter of looking at the product and thinking to yourself. So the Trinity that I've mentioned before about toys, food contact, and button cell batteries, those are your red flags. So if I was at my desk, I'd have that up on a board just to give me a reminder that these are the ones I need to always pay attention to. For something like an umbrella, you got to think about it because safety and compliance guidelines are created to protect people, property, and environment, and pets as well. So with an umbrella, what are the possibilities there? The only thing that I can think of is that if it had sharp points on the end of it, that it could poke somebody's eye out. And so even though there may not be a standard specific to umbrellas, you're going to want to make sure that anything that could be considered dangerous or obstructive to other people in the environment is addressed. So one thing you can do is you can ask the manufacturer, hey, what are some of the safety concerns about this? With the sharp points, like how do you deal with that? And the other thing too is, like I said before, you can contact SGS. So, and the testing facilities are really brilliant about the information they provide. So there have been plenty of cases where I've been like, wow, okay, I don't know what to do with this item. So I contact SGS and go, hey, have you ever, tested a pen that has a fan on it? And they'll come back to me and go like, okay, well, these are the products that we have tested, or the similar products that we've done, and these are the tests that we've done on it, which is a really good resource. So like I said, talking to these people is free. So I would definitely get in contact with them, get someone on email that you can ask questions to. And when you get a project that you're not familiar with or you're not sure about, like umbrellas, for example, you can email them, say, hey, here's a picture of a product I'm doing. I want to make sure that I'm safe and compliant to Australian standards. Have you tested something like this before? And if so, what were the tests? And the great thing about SGS is they'll come back and go, you know, we've never tested this. There are no standards for umbrellas. Or they'll come back and say, yes, we have, and this is what we've done.
Sounds good. Next question is, which I will probably answer in the email follow-up tomorrow because I'll have to check, but the question is, do all suppliers who are APA members have to have all their products tested? So I'll get back to you on that one. But the second question is, should we have peace of mind knowing that companies like High Caliber have all of their products tested before reselling? So could you just answer on the High Caliber section of it?
Yeah, I can definitely answer for High Caliber. And I can also give you just a quick heads up in industry in general. Anybody who's importing product has the requirement put on top of them to be compliant. So that exists, that the pressure of having to be compliant and keep your products in line is there, and it does come down to the importer. I know that people have been very curious about, you know, in the eyes of the law, who does this touch? And to be perfectly honest, it touches everybody. So if I sell you a product that's not compliant and you sell that product onto your customer and they give it out to the general public and nobody's decided to check the safety or compliance on it, everybody's kind of in the same boat. So as far as having peace of mind for High Caliber, with me on board and all of the product coming through me, I'm insane when it comes to this stuff. So you can be confident when you're working with us that we are constantly watching the regulations. I check them every couple months to see how they're changing and what's developing. We alter our products accordingly. So as the button cell batteries, for example, become more and more strict, we're having to change our labeling, we're having to change some of the packaging, and we're staying as proactive and ahead of that change as we can. For FDA 21, I'm very good about making sure that all of our products are tested for that. And so, yeah, as far as working with High Caliber, and the great thing about us is that we're also connected to our sister company in the US, and they also do the same kind of testing. So we keep the documentation on file. You can be confident that if I'm selling you a water bottle that's going to be in contact with, you know, beverages, that I've got it tested for the applicable, you know, regulations and standards. Happy to share that paperwork with anybody anytime that they request it. But yeah. And keep in mind, too, that if you're doing something custom with us, I will advise you if you walk into a situation that's going to require safety and compliance. So if you do plush with me, I will let you know this is a requirement. If you're going to do a custom bottle with me, I will let you know this is a requirement. This is going to be something that we're going to have to do. So it is something that we're very proactive about, and you can feel confident in selling our products that they are safe and compliant.
Excellent. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any other questions, but if you do have any other questions later, Paul's details are on the screen. Tomorrow you'll receive an email with a link to view today's recording and a link to view Paul's slides as well, which will have links to the websites that he's been talking about. So on behalf of Paul and APA, thanks for joining us today and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.